Hey everybody, welcome back to Weaponized CAD. I'm your host Danny, and today we are going to take the part that we designed in 2D and turn it into a 3D model. Now, this is going to be a unique example of it because this is a round part. So we're going to use different tools than I would normally use. But at the end, all of the tools kind of talk to each other. So when you're building a part, after a while you're going to recognize which commands you need to use based on what the 2D geometry looks like. So in this example, this is a round part. There's one command that is going to build most of this part in 3D for us, and that's the Revolve command. Now before I do that, I actually need to move our dimensions to a dimension layer so I can turn them off. So I'm going to go into the layer command, LA. I'm going to create a new layer. Just going to name it dim. I'm going to make the color red because that's very thin when it's printed. And continuous line type, and that's fine. And now I can close the layer properties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type select similar, SELECT SIMILAR, if I could spell. There we go. Select similar is used to pick objects of similar type in the properties. So linear dimensions. If you click one linear dimension, or select one linear dimension, it will, and then right click, it will select all the linear dimensions in the drawing. These are what are called diametric dimensions because it's measuring the diameter. So if I single left click this diametric dimension and right click, it automatically selects any diametric dimensions. So if I go to the properties, diametric dimension 4. So it's picked 1, 2, 3, 4. Now watch, I'm going to hit escape, select similar. I'm going to pick the diametric dimension. I'm also going to pick this dimension, the horizontal. I'm going to pick the radial dimension, and I'm going to pick the vertical dimension. And I'm going to right click. It just selected all of the dimensions in our drawing because I chose essentially one of each of the different types of dimensions. Now, if you remember back to the annotative scaling lesson, the annotation scale is what's controlling all these massive text. All these huge numbers, huge diameter symbols, and that's because there are a number of different annotative scales built into each one of these dimensions because we were fooling around with the annotation scale down at the bottom here. So all I wanted to do was select all the dimensions and I want to move them to a different layer. So I'm going to pull the layer drop down up here and I'm going to click dim and then I'm going to hit escape. So now what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to turn these dimensions off so we're not trying to create a 3D from a dimension. So I'm going to type LAYOFF and I'm going to pick any one of the dimensions. I can pick any one of them because now they're all on the same layer and all this command does is turns a layer off. So I'm going to pick this one and I'm going to right click. Now, if we go up to our layer manager here, or we go into the actual layer manager by typing LA, the dimension layer is actually turned off. The little light bulb is turned off. You can also see that up here if you pull the drop down, layers off. Okay, got a little sidetracked there. That's okay. That needed to be covered. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to take this part and we are going to turn it into a 3D model. Now, there's a couple things that we know, and then there's the thing that we figured out was screwed up on the original drawing over here, wherever that is. This hole down here is incorrect, so we're actually going to make it correct. So ignore that. I'm going to actually window select that and delete it. We want to delete this line. We want to delete our hatch. Actually, we can delete all of this interior stuff too. I'm going to erase all of that. Now, what I'm going to want to do is set up some viewports. So I'm going to type viewports. So all we want to do is just click 4 equal and then click OK. And we're going to get 4 of the exact same thing. Now, top left is always top view. Bottom left is always front view. Top, front. Bottom right is always right side view. Now, this is a 2D part. Actually, we can delete this text too. Up here, we are going to set this to southeast isometric. So what we want to do is we want to use what's called the Revolve command, which is REV, enter. And we want to take this geometry and we want to revolve it around this axis. But we have to do a couple things first. So we actually need to change this into a closed polyline. Closed polyline, J, enter. It's the join command. And we're going to select our line work. We can window select. We can pick one at a time. There. And then we're going to select it. We're going to make sure it's closed in the properties, which it is. This line here, we don't actually need. That line is going to automatically create itself. So I'm going to erase that line. Now, if we were to revolve this right now, it would essentially overlap itself because we would be revolving two sides of it 360 degrees. Instead of that, we are actually going to chop this in half using the trim command. So TR, we're going to select this center line as our cutting edge. We're going to right click and I'm just going to trim all that stuff out. Now, doing that opened the polyline. So we're going to want to type PL, endpoint, 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 and then we want to use the join command again, pick the half of our part, pick the line we just drew, right click, this should be closed. And it is closed, yes. Okay, now we are going to revolve, REV. Select objects to revolve. We want to pick our part, we want to right click, and then it's going to ask us to specify axis start point or define axis by object, X, Y, Z. It defaults to object. Object is the fastest way to do this because in the case of a circular part, you already know where the center of the part is. So what we're going to do, it's asking us for the object. Actually, we have to click object. I don't know why it defaults to that. We're going to click object. It's going to ask us to select an object. Our object is this axis. And when you single left click it, look what's happening in the upper right hand viewport. As we rotate the mouse cursor around, it's actually revolving the entire part. So now in this case, because our part is closed, we don't want to go through, we don't want to be a little bit short. We want to use 360. 360 defaults for the revolve command. It automatically defaults to 360 degrees, which is a closed circle. So in this case, we're just going to hit enter. And there's our part. Now, if we are not totally convinced, we can click on 2D wireframe up here and hit shaded. And there we go. If we hold down the control and the shift key, it gives us the orbit tool. So there's our part. It's not done yet. I'm going to let go of control and shift. I'm going to click back on southeast isometric. What we need to do now is we need to put these circles in. This one, and this one. And these are holes in our part. So what we really need to do here is we need to go to the front view. We need to type UCS. And we need to hit V as in Victor, enter. And what that does is it changes the UCS coordinates. Instead of being XY up here, it flattens this for us so we can work easier in XY. XY is whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to make this XY, you could do it by typing UCS V enter. Now, this would screw up a situation like this big time because now X and Y are the flat part of the screen and rotating things would be all out of whack because this is a 3D part. So we don't want to do that. UCS, enter, V, enter. What that's going to allow us to do is use the rotate command, RO. I'm going to select the part. I'm going to pick the center point of the part. I'm going to turn on F8 and pull straight down. And look what's happening in the top view. So now our part is lined up with our top view that we drew based on the part detail. So now another thing that we know is that these holes go all the way through. So what we can do in our southeast isometric view is we can type EXT, which is the extrude command. So now we've talked about the revolve command. That's a 3D command. Extrude is a 3D command. Extrude command, select objects to extrude or mode. We're going to ignore mode. All we want to do is pick the 3 circles that we need to cut out of our part. We're going to right click, and if we pull the cursor up, it's going to extrude those circles into cylinders. We can also zoom and pan with the mouse, or if we pull it down, it's going to extrude them into cylinders down. It doesn't really matter which way you pull it, because we're going to move it into place based on the 2D geometry. All we need to do right now is make sure that these cylinders are long enough that when we subtract them from our part, they will cut all the way through the part. So if I wanted to make these cylinders a mile long, I could. I'm going to make them humongous. Single left click to end the extrude command. And if we look over here, we have our 3 cylinders. Right side, 3 cylinders. Up here, you can't really tell that they're cylinders unless you select them. And it's going to tell us that it's a 3D solid because you can draw a cylinder as an actual cylinder, or you can just use 2D geometry and extrude it into a 3D solid. A cylinder is just a 3D solid. The only difference is that when you draw a cylinder, you can actually control the size of it and the depth of it. It's just a cuter way to manipulate 3D objects. We don't really care about that because all we're using these cylinders for is to subtract out the holes that are drilled through our part. So now, we're going to want to use the move command, M-enter. We're going to select our 3 cylinders, and we're going to pick the center of any one of these circles because they're all coincident. So we're going to right-click, C-E-N-enter. Going to pick the center of that circle, C-E-N-enter, and we're going to pick the center of our part. Now we ended up lucking out here because if we look in our isometric, the cylinders are actually poking all the way through the part where we need them to be. If they weren't, we can use the move command. Actually, I need to type UCS W for world. That sets our UCS icon back to top, front, right side, southwest isometric. You notice after I hit world, this went back to Z is up, Y and X. We're going to use the move command. We're going to select the 3 cylinders. We're going to right click, and with ortho on, F8, in isometric, you can pull along the y-axis, you can pull along the x-axis, and you can pull along the z-axis. So if you look at the 2 bottom viewports, we're actually pulling this in Z. And the reason that works is because in the isometric view, you can actually control Z without having to use the coordinates. You can just pull it with the mouse. So we just want to shoot these puppies all the way through this part, so when we subtract, we know it's going to cut these holes out. We can tell by looking at the front view. Can't really tell anything from the top view. It just looks like a bunch of 2D geometry, circle, 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 more circles. The next 3D command we're going to use is the subtract command. SU. Subtract asks us to select solids, surfaces, and regions to subtract from. What that means is that the first thing you pick is the object that you are subtracting other objects from. Our surface, or solid, or region is our main part. So I'm going to select it in the southeast isometric. You can select it in the top, front, right side. It really doesn't matter. Once you have objects that are laying over top of each other, having the 4 views is very important because you can actually hone in on what you're actually trying to click. In the top view, you could be clicking anything up and down 20 objects. There's a command that actually controls that. We haven't gotten into it yet. I will get into it at a further video. Okay, so we selected our main solid. Now it's going to ask us to select objects again. What that means is that we selected our first object and we need to right click. Otherwise, it's going to select more objects to subtract from. So we right click and it says select solids, surfaces, and regions to subtract. So in this case, we're going to pick our 3 cylinders. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to right click. And now we have 3 holes in our part. If we use Control Shift and we orbit around, you can actually see the holes in the part. So that was a super fast way to show you how to take a 2D drawing. We had a top and we had a right side. We took the top and right side and actually trimmed out part of the right side and revolved that right side trim into a 3D part and then used the top to determine what we were missing. So I don't know what the heck this part is, but that's it. You can zoom in here, get a good look at it. We've got our nice welds. And that's it for that. This video covered the extrude command very quickly. It covered the subtract command very quickly. And it covered the revolve command very quickly. We are going to draw more objects that are not going to be round parts. We're going to have to subtract and extrude. We're going to learn the union command. We're going to learn the intersect command. But in this one, because we had our round 2D part, we took that 2D line work and turned it into a 3D part. If I wanted to take this part, I could take this as it is and export it to my Ender 3 and print that in 3D. If I have enough filament, I will actually do that and show that in the next episode. Subtract, extrude, revolve. So if you learned something, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Thanks for coming, guys. I'll see you in the next one.